In February 2020, Malaysia's government collapsed in a single night. The Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, then 94 years old, the world's oldest head of government, resigned without warning. His coalition fractured. His designated successor was betrayed by members of his own party. The parliamentary majority evaporated like morning mist over the Straits of Malacca. No one commanded a majority. No one could form a government. Two rival factions claimed legitimacy. The constitution offered no clear procedure. Malaysia, a nation of 32 million people, had no functioning executive. And then the king did something extraordinary. Sultan Abdullah of Pahang, the 16th Yang di-Pertuan Agong, a title that translates roughly as "He who is made Lord," summoned every single member of parliament to the Istana Negara, the national palace. All 222 of them, one by one, over several days. Each legislator was asked a simple question: who do you support as prime minister? Picture this scene: a monarch in formal regalia, a politician in a suit, suddenly nervous, a conversation that might last 10 minutes or 40, the king taking notes, asking follow-up questions, probing for consistency 222 times. When the interviews concluded, the king announced that Muhyiddin Yassin commanded sufficient support to form a government. Muhyiddin was sworn in on March 1st, 2020. He had never won a general election as party leader. He had never faced a confidence vote in parliament. His legitimacy derived entirely from one source. The king had counted heads and made a judgment. That prime minister lasted 17 months. In August 2021, the king publicly rebuked Muhyiddin for misleading parliament, an unprecedented intervention in Malaysian politics. Muhyiddin resigned. The king consulted the Conference of Rulers, the Assembly of Malaysia's 9 hereditary sultans, and appointed a replacement, Ismail Sabri Yaakob. That prime minister lasted 15 months. In November 2022, a general election produced another hung parliament. No coalition achieved the 112 seats needed for a majority. Two leaders, Anwar Ibrahim with 82 seats, Muhyiddin with 73, each claimed the right to govern. Once again, the king interviewed party leaders. Once again, the Conference of Rulers convened. Once again, a monarch made the decision that the ballot box could not. Anwar Ibrahim became prime minister on November 24th, 2022. He had waited 24 years for the job through imprisonment, exile, and betrayal. In the end, he received it from the hand of a king. 3 prime ministers in 3 years, all appointed by royal intervention, the most sustained exercise of monarchical power in Malaysian history. And then in January 2024, the crown changed heads. Sultan Abdullah's 5-year term had ended, the rotation advanced. Sultan Ibrahim of Johor became the 17th Agong. The monarch who had navigated Malaysia through 3 years of political chaos simply went home to Pahang. The new king took his place. The queue moved forward. This is the system. This is what it does. And the question I want to answer tonight is, where does something like this come from? What problem was it designed to solve? And why does it work when it sounds like it shouldn't? Let us go back to 1956. The British Empire is retreating from Asia. India is already independent. Burma is independent. The Malay Peninsula, a patchwork of sultanates, strait settlements, and colonial territories, is next. The British have agreed to leave. The question is, what kind of country will they leave behind? The problem is that there is no single Malaya. There are 9 Malay sultanates, some tracing their lineages back 500 years. Each sultan is sovereign in his territory. Each rules over a population that considers him not merely a political leader, but a sacred figure, the embodiment of Malay identity, the guardian of Islam, the possessor of Daulat, the mystical radiance of kingship. None of these sultans will kneel to another. None will accept permanent subordination. The Sultanate of Johor will not be ruled from Perak. The Sultanate of Kelantan will not bow to Selangor. 5 centuries of dynastic pride stand behind each throne. And yet, everyone agrees that an independent Malaya must have a head of state. It must have someone to embody the nation, to sign legislation, to receive ambassadors, to command the armed forces in the formal sense that constitutional governments require. So the British do what the British do. They appoint a commission. The Reid Commission consists of 5 distinguished foreign jurists: Lord William Reid, a Scottish law lord; Sir Ivor Jennings, a constitutional expert; Sir William McKell, a former Governor-General of Australia; Justice B. Malik from India; and Justice Abdul Hamid from Pakistan. Their task is to draft a constitution for a country that does not yet exist, balancing the interests of 9 sultans, 3 major ethnic communities, and a retreating colonial power. They meet 118 times. They receive 131 memoranda. They travel throughout the peninsula, taking testimony, studying traditions, mapping the invisible architecture of Malay politics. And they confront the impossible question, who gets the crown? If you pick the most powerful sultan, the other 8 will resist. If you create a permanent federal monarchy, you destroy the sovereignty of the states. If you abolish the sultanates entirely, you eliminate the institution that gives Malay identity its political form, and you guarantee that the Malay population will never accept the constitution. The solution they devise is elegant, unprecedented, and slightly absurd. Rotate the crown. The Yang di Pertuan Agong, the supreme head of state, will be elected by the conference of rulers from among the 9 hereditary sultans. He will serve for 5 years. Then the crown will pass to the next sultan in line. The sequence is fixed. No sultan may serve a second term until all others have had their turn. Every 5 years, the most powerful position in the country changes hands, not through death, not through conquest, not through revolution, but through a calendar. The king has an expiration date printed on his reign from the day it begins. The first rotation completed in 1994. Malaysia is now in its 2nd cycle. By the time the system has run for a century, some sultanates will have held the federal throne 4 times, others 3. The mathematics of succession extend into a future no one can see, yet everyone can calculate. When the Reid Commission submitted its draft, many observers thought the rotating monarchy was a transitional compromise, something that would be reformed or abolished once the new nation found its footing. That was 67 years ago. The rotation continues. To understand why the Malaysian system matters, you must first understand the problem it solves. And that problem is very, very old. The Greeks had a word for it: stasis. Stasis meant, at root, a standing, a faction, a group of people who stand together against another group. But it came to mean something darker: civil strife, internal war, the condition in which a city tears itself apart from within. Every Greek city suffered from stasis. Syracuse endured 19 episodes of civil war between 650 and 214 BC. Athens was convulsed by oligarchic coups and democratic counter-coups. Corcyra, modern Corfu, descended into a bloodbath that the historian Thucydides described in terms that still chill the blood. Reckless audacity came to be considered the courage of a loyal supporter. Prudent hesitation, specious cowardice, moderation was held to be a cloak for unmanliness. The ability to understand a question from all sides meant that one was totally unfitted for action. Frantic violence became the attribute of manliness, cautious plotting a justifiable means of self-defense. The pattern was always the same: rival factions, oligarchs versus democrats, one aristocratic clan versus another, the rich versus the poor, competed for control of the state. Competition escalated. Norms collapsed. Exile gave way to massacre. The losers fled or died. The winners ruled until the next cycle of violence began. Thucydides believed this was inherent to human nature. The sufferings which revolution brings upon cities are many and terrible, such as have occurred and will always occur as long as the nature of mankind remains the same. The Romans knew the same disease, though they called it by different names. The conflict between patricians and plebeians, the wars between Marius and Sulla, the collapse of the Republic under Caesar and Pompey, then Octavian and Antony. Rome's greatest political achievement, the mixed constitution that balanced consuls, senate, and popular assemblies, ultimately failed because it could not contain factional competition for supreme power. Medieval and early modern Europe replayed the pattern endlessly. the Wars of the Roses, the French Wars of Religion, the English Civil War, the Fronde, wherever multiple claimants competed for a single throne, wherever aristocratic factions jockeyed for royal favor, wherever the prize of supreme power was worth killing for, there was stasis, there was civil war, there was blood. Now consider Malaysia in 1957. 9 sultanates, 9 dynasties with centuries of rivalry, 9 potential claimants to federal supremacy. This is exactly the configuration that produced endless civil wars in Greek polis, in medieval Europe, in the Holy Roman Empire. History suggests that such a system should generate faction, competition, and violence. The rotation dissolves the incentive. No sultan needs to fight for the crown because each will hold it in time. The queue replaces the battlefield. The conference of rulers meets not as rivals plotting against each other, but as a waiting room of future kings. The prize that killed republics, the supreme position, the ultimate power, the crown that factions would murder for, is removed from competition by making it temporary and sequential. Everyone gets a turn. No one needs to seize what will eventually be given. The ancients were not stupid. They saw the problem of stasis clearly. They tried to solve it. Consider Sparta. The Spartans had not one king but 2, from rival dynasties, the Agiads and the Eurypontids, ruling simultaneously. Each checked the other. Neither could become tyrant because his co-king would stop him. The system was supplemented by a council of elders, the Gerousia, 5 annually elected magistrates, the ephors, and a popular assembly. Sparta's constitution was the most admired in the ancient world, praised by Aristotle, studied by Polybius, imitated by Rome. It worked for a while. Sparta avoided the worst excesses of stasis for centuries, but dual kingship had its own problems. The 2 kings sometimes feuded. Their rivalry could paralyze the state in moments of crisis, and the system depended on both royal houses remaining viable. When the Agiad line weakened in the 3rd century BC, Sparta's stability collapsed with it. Malaysia's solution is more radical, not 2 kings checking each other, but 9 kings taking turns. Not simultaneous rivalry, but sequential succession. The checking mechanism is not competition, but the calendar. Consider Rome. In times of extreme emergency, the Roman Republic appointed a dictator, a single magistrate with absolute power. But the term was limited to 6 months maximum. The dictator was expected to solve the crisis and resign. Cincinnatus, the legendary exemplar of republican virtue, was twice called from his farm to save Rome. Twice he defeated the enemy and laid down power within weeks, returning to his plough before the astonished eyes of his countrymen. This system worked for nearly 300 years. Of roughly 85 dictatorships in the customary period from 501 to 202 BC, not one seized permanent control of the state. The combination of short-term limits, strong social norms, and the expectation of voluntary abdication produced a remarkable record of emergency powers exercised and relinquished. Then Sulla broke the pattern. Then Caesar. The Republic died not because the dictatorship was flawed in principle, but because the norms that constrained it eroded and ambitious men discovered they could redefine emergency to mean forever. Malaysia's advantage. The expiration date is constitutional, not customary. The Agong cannot stay because the next sultan is already waiting. The rotation is not a norm to be violated, but a mechanism that operates automatically. Caesar could declare himself dictator for life. No Agong can declare himself king for life because the conference of rulers would simply elect his successor when his term ended. Consider Venice. The Venetian Republic elected its doge through an absurdly complex process, 10 rounds alternating between lottery and voting, specifically designed so that no single family could capture the office. The system produced remarkable stability. Venice's constitution lasted over 500 years, from 1268 until Napoleon dissolved the republic in 1797. But the doge served for life. Some reigned for decades. Power accumulated in the hands of elderly men who had decades to build networks of influence. The complexity of the election prevented capture at the moment of selection. It did nothing to limit what a doge might do with 30 years on the throne. Malaysia combines Venetian election with Roman term limits. The Agong is chosen from a closed set of candidates, the nine sultans, by a deliberative body, the Conference of Rulers. But he serves 5 years, no more, regardless of his age or popularity or effectiveness. The system gets the legitimacy of aristocratic selection without the calcification of lifetime tenure. Let me be precise about what makes the Malaysian system unique. It is not simply that the monarch is elected. The Holy Roman Emperor was elected, the Pope is elected, the Doge of Venice was elected. Election alone does not prevent the accumulation of power or the capture of office by a single faction. It is not simply that the monarch serves a fixed term. Modern presidents serve fixed terms. So did Roman consuls. Term limits alone do not guarantee peaceful succession or prevent desperate gambits to retain power. It is not simply that the monarch is chosen from a hereditary aristocracy. That was true of medieval Europe, where succession wars were endemic. Hereditary eligibility alone does not solve the problem of competition among eligible candidates. What makes Malaysia different is the combination: election plus term limits plus mandatory rotation plus a fixed sequence that cannot be altered by any single actor. No sultan can hold the federal crown twice until all others have served. The sequence is not random. It follows a fixed order established by tradition and confirmed by practice. Everyone knows who is next. Everyone can calculate when their turn will come. The uncertainty that breeds competition, will I ever get the crown? Should I fight for it now? Is replaced by certainty. My turn will come. I need only wait. This transforms the psychology of power. In most systems, the path to supreme power involves defeating rivals. You must win elections, outmaneuver opponents, build coalitions, destroy enemies. The crown goes to whoever can take it and hold it. This creates an evolutionary pressure toward ruthlessness. The people who reach the top are precisely those willing to do whatever it takes to get there. In Malaysia, the path to supreme power involves waiting your turn. You do not need to defeat anyone. You do not need to campaign or scheme or betray. You are already in the queue. The crown will come to you or to your successor, inevitably, automatically, by the operation of a system that no one controls. This does not mean Malaysian sultans are passive or apolitical. They have interests, they have allies, they jockey for influence within the Conference of Rulers. But the ultimate prize is not subject to that competition. The crown rotates regardless of who is more powerful or popular or cunning at any given moment. The genius is this: the system takes the most dangerous prize in politics, supreme power, and transforms it from something to be seized into something to be awaited. The queue does what constitutions and norms and virtue could never reliably do. It removes the incentive for violence by guaranteeing everyone a turn. Imagine the psychology. You are a Malay sultan. You rule your state, let us say Perak or Kelantan or Negeri Sembilan. You sit on a throne that your ancestors have held for generations. Within your borders, you are the embodiment of sovereignty, the guardian of Islam, the fountain of honor and patronage. And you know that one day, perhaps in 5 years, perhaps in 20, perhaps in 40, you will become the Yang di Pertuan Agong. You will be the king of all Malaysia. You will move to the Istana Negara in Kuala Lumpur. Foreign ambassadors will present credentials to you. The armed forces will formally be under your command. The Prime Minister will seek your consent. But you also know that this reign will end. 5 years. Then you return to your state and another sultan takes your place. You will watch your successor from the sidelines, perhaps for decades, until the rotation brings you back, if it ever does, if you live long enough. Some sultans will die before reaching the front of the queue. Others will serve as Agong in their 60s or 70s, with little time remaining. The timing is arbitrary, dictated by longevity and the accidents of succession within each state. Yet the sequence is fixed. You cannot jump the queue, you can only wait. The Conference of Rulers meets at least 3 times a year. 9 sultans and the 4 governors of states without hereditary rulers gather to discuss matters of national importance. They elect the next Agong when a term ends. They advise on constitutional amendments. They serve as the collective guardian of Malay privileges and the special position of Islam. Think of what this meeting is. 9 men who are all, in some sense, kings. 9 men who all know exactly where they stand in a sequence. 9 men who all know that supreme power will eventually come to each of them or pass them by forever. In 2019, something unprecedented happened. Sultan Muhammad V of Kelantan, who had become Agong in 2016, resigned. He had married a Russian beauty queen in a ceremony that became tabloid fodder around the world. Whether the marriage, the publicity, or some other factor prompted his decision, he became the first Agong in Malaysian history to abdicate. The system handled it without crisis. The Conference of Rulers met. Sultan Abdullah of Pahang was elected to fill the remainder of the term, then confirmed for a full term of his own. The queue adjusted, the rotation continued. A king quit, and the nation shrugged. This is the proof of the system's resilience. It does not depend on any particular sultan being wise or capable or dedicated. It does not require that every king be a statesman. It assumes that some will be better than others, that some will disappoint, that some will walk away, and it survives anyway, because the rotation ensures that no single person's failures can permanently damage the institution. The waiting room of kings is patient. It has time. Western observers often misunderstand the Malaysian monarchy because they apply Western categories. They see constitutional monarchy and think of Britain, a ceremonial figurehead, a rubber stamp, a living symbol with no real power. They see elected monarch and think of the Holy Roman Emperor or the papacy, an office filled by political maneuvering among eligible candidates. They see rotating leadership and think of the European Union presidency, a bureaucratic arrangement with little emotional resonance. None of these analogies capture what the Agong is. To understand the Malaysian monarchy, you must understand Daulat. Daulat is not a constitutional concept. It is older than constitutions, older than Islam in Southeast Asia, older than the sultanates themselves. The word derives from Arabic, where it means something like state or dynasty. But in the Malay world, it acquired a different meaning, one rooted in the Hindu-Buddhist concept of Sakti, the supernatural power that inheres in sacred rulers. Daulat is the sacred aura that surrounds the ruler. It attaches to his person, his throne, his regalia. It is cosmological in origin. The ruler sits at the center of a human world that is embedded in a larger sacred order. His power is not merely political, it is metaphysical. He does not simply govern, he radiates legitimacy. The traditional counterpart of Daulat is Durhaka, treason, rebellion, the violation of sacred loyalty. To commit Durhaka is not merely to break a law, it is to rupture the cosmic order. Traditional Malay society believed that Durhaka brought supernatural punishment, that the disloyal would be cursed, that no good could come from betraying the possessor of Daulat. Now, the modern Malaysian constitution does not formally recognize Daulat as a source of authority. The constitution is supreme. The Agong's powers are defined and limited by constitutional text. In a legal sense, the Agong is a creature of the constitution, not a sacred being whose authority precedes and transcends law. But the Malay population does not experience the monarchy as merely constitutional. The sultans still carry Daulat. The rituals of installation still invoke sacred tradition. The deference paid to rulers still reflects centuries of belief in their metaphysical significance. When the Agong speaks, Malaysians listen in a way they do not listen to politicians, because he embodies something that elections cannot create and constitutions cannot fully capture. The rotation circulates this sacred legitimacy. Every 5 years, Daulat flows to a different sultanate, a different dynasty, a different state. The cosmic center of Malay kingship moves from Pahang to Johor, from Johor to Perak, from Perak to wherever the queue leads next. No single dynasty can monopolize the sacred aura of federal monarchy. The rotation binds the nation together by giving every eligible state a share in the highest dignity. This is what the West misses. The Agong is not merely a constitutional functionary who happens to wear a crown. He is a vessel of sacred legitimacy in a society that still, despite modernization and secularization and legal rationality, experiences its rulers as carriers of metaphysical significance. The rotation does not diminish this. It spreads it across the Federation like a blessing shared among brothers. No constitutional system is static. Malaysia's rotating monarchy has been contested, challenged, and reformed, most dramatically by the man who defined Malaysian politics for a generation. Mahathir Mohamad served as Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003, 22 years, the longest tenure in Malaysian history. He was an architect of Malaysia's rapid industrialization, the builder of Kuala Lumpur's iconic skyline, the voice of Asian values against Western hegemony. He was also emphatically a commoner who believed that the aristocracy had too much power. In 1983, Mahathir moved to strip the Agong of the power to withhold consent from legislation. Under the original constitution, the king could delay bills indefinitely. Mahathir wanted to reduce this to a suspensive veto that could be overridden. The Sultans resisted. Mahathir launched a propaganda campaign highlighting royal extravagance and abuse. The country polarized. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The Agong could delay legislation for 30 days, but Parliament could override his objection. The 1983 crisis was about power in the technical sense. Who controls the legislative process? The 1993 crisis was about something deeper. In 1992, a hockey coach named Douglas Gomez was assaulted, allegedly by the Sultan of Johor himself, in a dispute over the state hockey team. The incident was hushed up initially, but it became public and Mahathir seized the moment. He proposed removing royal immunity from prosecution. The sultans, he argued, should be subject to the same laws as everyone else. The rulers rejected the amendment. Parliament passed it anyway. The Agong refused to sign. For weeks, Malaysia had a constitutional standoff, Parliament asserting democratic sovereignty, the monarchy invoking traditional prerogative. Eventually, another compromise. A special court would be created to try royals, with safeguards to prevent political prosecution, but the fundamental principle was established. The sultans were no longer legally untouchable. Mahathir declared that the feudal system had ended. The Sultan's defenders accused him of destroying a sacred institution for political gain. Both were partially right. What actually happened was that the system worked. The whole point of a mixed constitution, in Polybius's terms, in Cicero's terms, in the classical republican tradition, is that different elements check each other. The democratic element checks the aristocratic checks the democratic. Neither can dominate entirely. Mahathir's attacks on royal power were not a malfunction of the Malaysian system. They were the democratic element doing exactly what it is supposed to do. And the monarchy survived. The rotation continued. The sultans lost some legal privileges, but retained their sacred status, their constitutional role, their reserve powers. The balance shifted, but did not break. Mahathir himself, decades later, would rely on the Agong to navigate the 2020 crisis. The same monarchy he had attacked would prove indispensable when democracy failed to produce a clear result. This is what resilience looks like. Not a system so rigid it cannot change, nor so flexible it has no shape, but a system that absorbs challenges, adapts to pressures, bends without breaking. The democratic assault did not destroy the monarchy. It pruned it, modernized it, reminded it that legitimacy in a constitutional system cannot rest on tradition alone. Let us return to 2020 and look more carefully at what the Agong actually did. When Mahathir resigned and the government collapsed, the constitution provided no clear procedure. Article 43 says the Agong shall appoint as Prime Minister a member of Parliament who in his judgment is likely to command the confidence of the majority. But how is that judgment to be formed? The constitution does not say. In Britain, the comparable situation is handled by convention. The monarch invites the leader of the largest party to form a government or brokers negotiations behind the scenes. But Britain has a stable two-party system and centuries of accumulated precedent. Malaysia in 2020 had neither, multiple coalitions, defecting MPs, claims, and counterclaims. No one knew who commanded a majority because no vote had been taken. The Agong could have simply picked someone and hoped for the best. He could have waited for the politicians to sort it out themselves. He could have called for Parliament to convene and test confidence through a vote. Instead, he conducted the interviews. 222 MPs, each asked directly, "Whom do you support?" This was unprecedented, but it was not unconstitutional. The Constitution says the Agong must exercise judgment. Judgment requires information. What better way to gather information than to ask every member of Parliament directly, face to face, under the solemnity of a royal audience? The critics said the Agong was overreaching by interviewing MPs rather than waiting for a parliamentary vote. He was substituting royal judgment for democratic process. The defenders said he was filling a vacuum. With no government functioning and no mechanism to produce one, someone had to act. The Agong's intervention was not anti-democratic but pre-democratic, creating the conditions under which democracy could function again. The pattern repeated in 2021 and 2022. Each time the parliamentary situation became untenable, the monarchy stepped in. Each time the critics complained and the defenders justified. Each time the system lurched forward, imperfectly but functionally. And then, in January 2024, Sultan Abdullah's term ended. He had exercised more royal power than any Agong since Merdeka. He had appointed 3 prime ministers. He had publicly rebuked one of them. He had bent the Constitution's ambiguities toward active intervention at every crisis point. And he handed over the crown on schedule. No attempt to extend his term, no suggestion that his extraordinary service entitled him to continue, no Caesarism, no clinging, no redefining of emergency to mean permanent. The queue advanced. Sultan Ibrahim became the 17th Agong. The system continued. This is the vindication. Not that the system avoided crisis. It did not. Malaysia from 2020 to 2022 was in continuous political turmoil, but that it survived crisis, that emergency powers were exercised and relinquished, that the rotation continued regardless of how indispensable any particular king seemed, that the calendar defeated whatever temptations power might create. What does Malaysia teach? First, that the ancient problem of political faction has ancient solutions, and those solutions can be adapted to modern conditions. The Greeks feared stasis, the Romans created mechanisms to contain it, the Malaysians, accidentally, pragmatically, without grand theory, reinvented those mechanisms for a post-colonial federation. The rotating kingship is not a curiosity, but a contribution to the long human conversation about how to prevent power from destroying the communities it is meant to serve. Second, that the calendar can do what virtue cannot. Cincinnatus laid down the dictatorship because he was Cincinnatus, a man of extraordinary character, celebrated for millennia as the exemplar of republican selflessness. But systems cannot depend on virtue. Caesar was also a Roman, raised in the same traditions, and Caesar did not lay down power. The Malaysian system does not require its kings to be virtuous. It requires only that they accept the expiration date printed on their reign from the beginning. The rotation makes abdication automatic, normal, expected, not a heroic sacrifice, but a routine transfer. Third, that legitimacy can be shared without being diluted. The daulat of Malay kingship, the sacred aura that attaches to rulers and makes their authority feel natural rather than imposed, circulates through the federation. Each state gets its turn at the cosmic center. The nation is bound together not by suppressing regional identities, but by rotating the highest honor among them. This is a model for federations everywhere, not domination by a center, but participation in a shared dignity. Fourth, that mixed constitutions still work. The Malaysian system combines monarchy, the Agong, aristocracy, the conference of rulers, and democracy, parliament and elections. Each element checks the others. Mahathir's democratic assaults pruned aristocratic excess. The Agong's interventions resolved democratic deadlocks. The balance is not static but dynamic, shifting as circumstances require, yet stable in its overall architecture. Polybius would recognize it. Cicero would admire it. The American founders, who also tried to build a mixed constitution, though they avoided the language of kingship, would find it instructive. Fifth, and most important, that the deepest political wisdom lies in accepting impermanence. Every political system is haunted by the fear of succession. Who comes next? How will power transfer? What happens when the current holder dies or fails or becomes unfit? Monarchies fear disputed successions. Republics fear coups and stolen elections. All forms of government fear the moment when legitimacy must pass from one holder to another. Malaysia built succession into the structure. The agong is always temporary. The next king is always known. The transfer is always scheduled. Impermanence is not a vulnerability to be managed, but a feature to be embraced. The throne has an expiration date, and that expiration date is the source of its strength. The waiting room of kings is not a holding pen for disappointed ambition. It is a mechanism for producing legitimacy without violence, continuity without stagnation, authority without tyranny. It is an answer, imperfect, contingent, rooted in a particular history, to one of the oldest questions in politics. How do we share power among those who want it without letting the competition destroy us? 9 sultans, 1 crown, a queue that moves on schedule, and a nation that has discovered, perhaps without fully understanding what it has discovered, that the secret to stable government is not finding the perfect ruler, but ensuring that no ruler is permanent. The queue advances, the crown changes heads, the system endures.